Dr. Rick Marshall had it all: brilliance, confidence, and a groundbreaking theory about time warps. But one disastrous interview with Matt Lauer changed everything. Instead of proving his genius, he ended up embarrassing himself on live TV, capping it off with an attempted assault on the talk show host. Spoiler alert, it did not help his reputation. Fast forward 3 years, and Marshall is no longer a respected scientist. He's a washed-up joke, giving dull lectures at the George C. Page Museum, where even the students find him more amusing than educational. His once promising career? Reduced to a cautionary tale about what not to do in science. Just when Dr. Rick Marshall thought his career was as dead as a fossil, Holly Cantrell walks in. She's a bright-eyed, enthusiastic scientist who actually believes in his wild theories. She presents him with proof of tachyon activities in a creepy place called Devil's Cave. Marshall, desperate for a win, shakes off his failure funk and gets back to work. Using whatever resources he has left, he finally completes his long-abandoned invention, the tachyon amplifier. This device, in theory, can open a portal through time and space. In theory, of course. Dr. Marshall and Holly, armed with science and reckless optimism, head to the desert to test their wild theory. But they need a guide. Enter Will Stanton, a laid-back, wisecracking dude who runs a struggling roadside attraction. Will isn't exactly the adventurous type, but when money's involved, suddenly he's very interested in science. The trio ventures into the eerie Devil's Cave, where Marshall, with the confidence of a man who's definitely never tested this before, fires up the tachyon amplifier. Boom! A massive time-space rift opens, sucking them into a swirling vortex. Their precious device? Gone in the chaos. The three of them crash land in a place that makes no sense. A bizarre universe where past, present, and future meet. Marshall, Holly, and Will stumble into their first big discovery, a small monkey-like creature named Chaka. Unfortunately, Chaka is in trouble, being bullied by two bigger ape men. Just when things look bad, Will accidentally invents fire, because nothing says genius like waving a lighter around. The apes, terrified of this newfound magic, run for the hills, and Chaka, now their furry little best friend, tags along. But there's no time for bonding. As they wander deeper into this strange world, they unknowingly enter a dinosaur feeding ground. Great news if you're a T-Rex, bad news if you're anything else. Enter Grumpy, a massive, hungry Tyrannosaurus Rex who immediately decides Marshall looks like a tasty snack. The trio sprints for their lives, reaching a narrow land bridge. Marshall, feeling a little too smart for his own good, assumes Grumpy won't jump because, tiny dino brain. He mocks the T-Rex, which, as it turns out, is a terrible idea. With an unexpected display of athleticism, Grumpy leaps across the gap, proving that revenge is a great motivator. The group barely escapes into a cave, but now Grumpy has a personal grudge against Marshall. A dinosaur with a vendetta? Yeah, that's not going to end well. The next morning, the group wakes up to a surprise gift outside their shelter. A giant, gift-wrapped walnut. No, it's not a thoughtful gesture from nature. It's from Grumpy, the T-Rex, with a grudge. Turns out, this dino isn't just terrifying, he's petty. The walnut is his way of saying, "Hey, remember when you called me dumb? Well, joke's on you." Meanwhile, Chaka, ever the generous little monkey man, offers the group some strange-looking fruit. Sweet, right? Well, not when said fruit is crawling with giant spiders. Cue the panic, the screaming, and the immediate regret. As if their morning couldn't get any weirder, Marshall suddenly has a vision of a strange humanoid creature pleading for help. Because running toward creepy visions is obviously a great idea, he dashes into the jungle, with Holly and Will reluctantly following. Their spontaneous jungle adventure leads them straight into a Sleestack lair, home to slow-moving yet terrifying reptilian creatures who definitely don't look like they want to be friends. Just as things start looking really bad, a mysterious portal, called a pylon, opens up, giving them just enough time to escape. Inside the mysterious pylon, the group meets Enoch, a wise-looking Altrusian who seems noble and trustworthy. Or so he says. He warns them that an evil being named Zarn wants to take over the universe using the tachyon amplifier. Yep, the very same device Marshall lost during their chaotic arrival. Marshall, still clinging to the hope of proving he's not a complete failure, agrees to retrieve it. Will, however, isn't buying Enoch's wise old lizard act and remains highly suspicious. But with no better options, the group, guided by Chaka, sets off to find the device. Their journey takes them to a massive salt flat teeming with prehistoric horrors, including Compsognathus, tiny but vicious scavengers, and velociraptors, fast, smart, and very hungry. Along the way, they witness a poor ice cream man get absolutely demolished by dinosaurs. If that's not a sign to turn back, nothing is. Then things go from bad to dino disaster when Grumpy, yes, the T-Rex with a personal vendetta, shows up and sends the smaller predators running. But before anyone can breathe a sigh of relief, an even bigger problem stomps in. Big Alice, an angry Allosaurus with a serious attitude. Unfortunately for Marshall, both dinos seem very interested in him. Why? Well, earlier he thought it would be brilliant to use dinosaur urine as camouflage. Turns out it worked too well. Now he smells like a prehistoric buffet. A wild chase ensues, with Marshall barely staying ahead of his hungry admirers. Thinking fast, for once, he manages to trick Grumpy and then uses liquid nitrogen to freeze Big Alice, shattering her into dino chunks. In the chaos, he finally recovers the tachyon amplifier. Just when things start looking up, fate and prehistoric wildlife has other plans. Out of nowhere, a giant pteranodon swoops in, snatches the tachyon amplifier, and flies off with it. Determined to get it back, the group follows the winged thief to its nest. But breaking in isn't as easy as it sounds. So naturally, Marshall decides the best way to calm its babies is by singing the theme song from the original Land of the Lost TV show. Because nothing says stealth mission like a musical number. Despite the ridiculousness, they actually manage to grab the device and escape mostly unharmed. Back at their makeshift motel, which is just as glamorous as it sounds, Holly wanders off and stumbles upon a hidden pylon. Inside, she discovers a shocking holographic message. Turns out Enoch isn't the wise and noble hero he claimed to be. Nope, he's the real villain, and Zarn was innocent all along. Before she can warn the others, she's ambushed and kidnapped by Sleestax. Meanwhile, Marshall, Will, and Chaka are completely unaware of Holly's disappearance because they're busy enjoying their latest achievement, cooking and eating a giant crab. Their victory feast is unexpectedly explosive when the poor crab accidentally steps on a geyser and blows up, showering them with a buffet of perfectly cooked meat. A little horrifying? Yes. Delicious? Also yes. Eventually, they realize Holly is missing, finally, and set off to rescue her. Their brilliant plan? Disguise themselves in shed Sleestax skins. Meanwhile, Holly finds herself on trial before the Library of Skulls, a council of floating, talking skulls that seem to have all the answers. The verdict? Enoch is definitely the bad guy. His evil plan? Use the tachyon amplifier to invade and conquer other worlds. So yeah, the stakes just got way higher. Marshall and Will burst into Holly's trial like a couple of wild action heroes, except, let's be honest, a little less coordinated. They crash the proceedings, grab Holly, and come face to face with Enoch, who finally drops his wise old reptile act. His actual plan? Overpopulate the entire universe with Sleestax. Enoch, being the overconfident villain he is, leaves the trio to be executed, assuming they're doomed. But before the Sleestax can strike, guess who shows up? That's right, Grumpy, the T-Rex with a grudge. And instead of running for his life like any normal person, Marshall takes a heroic, but incredibly stupid, approach. He dives straight into the dinosaur's mouth. For a moment, it looks like this is really the end for Marshall. But then, in an act of pure movie magic, Grumpy suddenly excretes him. Yes, you heard that right. Turns out Marshall somehow survived inside the beast, and now Grumpy, perhaps impressed by his sheer insanity, decides to switch sides. With their new dino ally leading the charge, the group fights back, absolutely wrecking the Sleestax army. It's chaos. It's epic. Finally, the team makes it to the pylon, where they destroy the power crystal, shutting down Enix's portal and saving Earth from a reptilian invasion. Mission accomplished. But with the gateway closing, there's one last decision to make. Will chooses to stay behind with Chaka. At first, it seems like a selfless act of bravery, until he immediately realizes that Chaka's so-called ugly harem is actually a group of stunning women in loincloths. As they gather around him, he takes one look and proudly declares, "I made the right choice." And with that, Marshall and Holly return home, their wild adventure coming to an end. Back on Earth, Dr. Rick Marshall makes a triumphant return to the Today Show, where Matt Lauer, who once humiliated him, now has no choice but to begrudgingly acknowledge his success. You can practically see the pain on Lauer's face. Marshall, never one to let things slide, takes full advantage of the moment. First, he gifts Lauer a dinosaur egg, a classy yet cryptic little souvenir from his insane adventure. But the real pièce de resistance, his brand new book, titled Matt Lauer Can Suck It. Yes, that is the actual title, proudly displayed on live television. As expected, history repeats itself. Only this time, it's Matt who loses it and lunges at Marshall. As the dust settles and the studio lights dim, the camera lingers on the forgotten dinosaur egg, sitting innocently on the set. Suddenly, a tiny Sleestak claw pokes through the shell, hinting that maybe, just maybe, this wild adventure isn't quite over yet. And so the movie ends, proving once and for all that time travel is dangerous, dinosaurs hold grudges, and Matt Lauer really can't take a joke.